How likely is it that the next place you stay at will have a hidden camera? And just how do you find hidden cameras anyways? How cautious should you be the next time you're staying in an Airbnb? Or maybe even a hotel? There are plenty of stories about Airbnbs with hidden cameras over the years. And the strange thing is, it isn't quite as clear-cut as you think it would be, even when you do find a camera. Robert Wallenberg had to find out the hard way back in September 2018 when he was in Toronto for a film festival. He had rented an Airbnb from owner Michael Chow for 10 days. During his stay, he noticed an alarm clock that was pointed directly at the bed and figured that it was a bit strange. Lo and behold, he discovered that the alarm clock was really a hidden camera. So he did what any of us would do and contacted the police. When police showed up, Wallenberg invited the officer in and showed him the alarm clock. The officer seized it as evidence. He placed it in a property locker at the police station. Another officer later inspected the camera briefly and then applied for a warrant to search the device. Once they obtained a warrant, they found recordings of different guests, including the owner himself, doing all the sort of things you imagine people in private do. The police charged Chow with voyeurism. It seems like an open and shut case, right? Well, not so fast. At trial, Chow argued for exclusion of the video evidence on the basis that police violated his rights with the warrantless search and seizure. The officer who entered agreed that he had made no attempt to contact Chow before entering the condo. He said he believed he was justified in going in at Wallenberg's invitation because he had the key and temporary ownership of the unit. However, the key issue here is whether the owner had a reasonable expectation of privacy in the condo unit. Ontario Court Judge Joseph Bavard concluded that Chow did and should have a reasonable expectation of privacy. The reason was because he was the sole owner of the apartment. It was filled with his possessions, and he used the place himself at times. So basically, this means that an Airbnb could record you at their place and possibly completely get away with it. At least with a hotel, this couldn't possibly happen because hotels are there specifically to rent out 100% of the time. This is not true for most Airbnb rentals. Judge Bavard also rejected the prosecution's argument that by renting out his condo to Wallenberg, Chow had undermined his own privacy expectations. He ruled that whatever rights Mr. Wallenberg had over the apartment, Mr. Chow's privacy rights for his apartment could not be waived. Yep, Chow ended up having all charges dropped. This shows that different areas of the world would have different interpretations of rights of privacy. In this particular case, it seems that the police should have applied for a warrant to search Chow's place before they seized the alarm clock. It seems as if Chow had rented out his place full-time to Airbnb, then he probably wouldn't have gotten off his charges. Of course, Airbnb hosts have plenty of reasons to have cameras on properties they rent out to strangers. They can catch guests who attempt to steal their private property. It's actually really handy to catch the guests who trash the place because there's direct video evidence. Then there are the situations where people initially say they're traveling alone, but they show up to a property with 5 extra people. But obviously, common sense says this never means that these reasons should mean it's okay to film bedrooms and bathrooms. Even hotel rooms and casinos are not filmed, and we all know casinos are probably the most heavily surveillanced places in the world. So what exactly is Airbnb's stance on cameras? Airbnb's rules allow cameras outdoors and in living rooms and common areas. However, they never allow it in bathrooms or anywhere guests plan to sleep, including rooms with fold-out beds. Of course, we know that it doesn't stop owners from doing it. Starting in early 2018, Airbnb added another layer of disclosure. If hosts indicate they have cameras anywhere on their property, you're supposed to receive a pop-up informing you where the cameras are located and where they're aimed when you're looking at the listing. To book the property, you would have to click Agree to indicate that you're aware of the cameras and consent to being filmed. However, even with Airbnb having written that clearly on its website, this wasn't Jeff Bigham's experience back in January of 2019. His particular case is a bit different here because he found cameras in his Airbnb in the living areas. Bigham discovered cameras in his rental that he claimed were never disclosed. After he reached out to the trust and safety team, representatives told him he and his family had in fact consented to the cameras because they were visibly displayed in photos on the listing. This doesn't sound like the website procedures Airbnb supposedly had in place beginning in 2018, right? Bigham says customer service representatives for Airbnb twice had sided against him before reversing their original decision. And they only did that because he had created a blog post about it and it went viral. Bigham had to rely on social media visibility to settle his case, but he had crucial evidence anyway. He had photos of the cameras and proof he never agreed to any disclosures. Robert Wallenberg's outcome with Chow isn't that unusual. There are other examples where law enforcement sided with the Airbnb host. Max Vest had rented a room to stay inside the home of his Airbnb hosts in Miami. While he was preparing to go to sleep the first night, he saw something strange. Two small black rectangular boxes were stacked next to an outlet on the far side of the guest room. They both were facing the bed. At first, they looked like phone chargers, but when Vest got closer, he realized they were cameras, and they were recording. He quickly got dressed, grabbed his belongings, and put the camera's memory cards as evidence. Then panic set in. It was almost midnight, and he was alone in the home of someone whose name he didn't even know, apparently being recorded. What's more, his host could have been watching as he discovered the cameras. When Vest found the cameras that night, he had no idea what type they were or whether they were streaming live to his host or saving to the memory cards. Airbnb makes no restrictions on the devices hosts can use. This becomes a potential problem for guests as home surveillance cameras get smaller, cheaper, and more advanced. Because, face it, how would anyone know when cameras get as small as this? But the more concerning problem is the ambiguity in terms of legality. When Vest reported what he found, Miami PD didn't really see things his way. The officers actually had questioned Vest in return. They accused him of theft because he had taken Ralph's keys and memory cards when he left the house that night. Vest explained to Miami PD that he hadn't just stumbled across cameras in someone's home and stolen their property. He was the one who was the victim of a crime. The officers didn't see it that way. Vest's Airbnb host may have violated Airbnb's rules, but the Miami Police Department doesn't enforce Airbnb's terms of service. In their eyes, the host was a homeowner with every right to have cameras in his own home. Vest, meanwhile, had admitted to taking Ralph's property without his consent or knowledge. Airbnb is a middleman in these situations. It doesn't own its rental properties or employ its hosts. Even though guests book and pay through Airbnb's interface, Airbnb is just a broker. The company imposes rules, but it's mostly to comply with local tax and housing regulations. And the biggest problem is this. Company rules don't supersede local laws, even if guests assume they will. This makes for all kinds of confusion, especially when something goes wrong. To be honest, we're not really down on Airbnbs here, because the same thing can easily happen in a hotel too. There were cases where hotels have been found with hidden cameras that live stream footages to illegal sites online. Obviously, this isn't something that the hotel operators themselves were doing. Anyone can just book some hotel rooms and set up their operations in those rooms. It's just that with Airbnb, it's not as easy to press charges against the perpetrator. However, unless we just stop staying in hotels and Airbnbs, this is a risk we take on. But there are ways to find hidden cameras where you stay. And maybe the government will make people register to buy super small surveillance cameras in order to stem the future problem of unauthorized filming. So how do you find hidden cameras next time you're at an Airbnb or hotel? Start with the basics. Look for any odd-looking things in your Airbnb. Gadgets that look bulky or out of place in their surroundings may contain a hidden camera. It's not the easiest thing to spot a gadget containing a hidden camera that looks out of place. Cameras have gotten so small that they can be hidden in virtually any device. Alarm clocks, wall clocks, smoke detectors, mirrors, light bulbs, speakers, and USB wall plugs are just a few examples. The key here is to recognize anything out of place and then do the next step, which is to look for a lens. But how do you do that? You do the flashlight trick. A hidden camera has to have a lens, and that lens is typically made of glass, and the object it's hidden in is made of plastic or other non-glass materials. Glass is generally more reflective than other materials, so the lenses of hidden cameras can be rather easy to spot around the room. So it's worth giving your Airbnb a once-over with the phone on your flashlight. Turn off all the lights and slowly do a few sweeps of every room looking for any small bright flashes of light. If you spot any coming from an object, examine it more closely. You may have just found a hidden camera. The other trick is to use the camera on your phone to look. If you haven't found any cameras yet, you can try looking for infrared lights. Most IP cameras use infrared for night vision. Some smartphones have filters to block out infrared light on their primary camera, but very few of them have filters on the front camera. To determine which camera will work, grab a TV remote, point it at your phone's camera, and press a button. If you see the light on the screen, then it can detect infrared. If you don't, try again with the front-facing camera. Then it's time to sweep the entire room again. IP cameras don't come in any standard configuration, so you might see just any combination of lights. They'll typically be purple, but sometimes they can look white too. The last thing to look for is to check the Wi-Fi for any networked cameras. You can download an app such as Fing on your phone, and it'll scan the network for devices using the internet. The idea here is to look at all the devices connected to the local network. You'll be looking out for anything that shows a camera manufacturer, such as Nest, Arlo, or Wyze, or anything that lists IP camera. Watch this next video to find out how this kid was living a GTA lifestyle.